Chapter 37. Isabella found herself too concerned with fending off Alaydrian's relentless attacks to notice Aventil's disappearance. A hurricane spell threw Isabella across the factory floor. From a seated position, she had to dive for cover from the razor-sharp pincer appendage Alaydrian conjured next. Bok fared even worse. He tried to replicate the attack that had served him so well against Kaz Kosan, but when he hurled a crate of magic jars at Spelonian, the sorcerer smiled and reversed the spell, sending the crate flying back into Bok's midsection. He sprawled across the brick floor as the breath left his body. Dazed, Bok pushed himself back up onto his hands and knees. He couldn't beat Spelonian at high magic. The more skilled Scion sorcerer could counter any of Bok's spells. Now he smirked as he stood over Bok. "I do not know who you truly are, or how you learned to cast spells, peasant. But it matters not. You and your friends came all this way, fought so hard, only to fail." His hands began to glow. Bok crawled across the brick floor looking for some way to prolong his life. Then, the most curious thought, and perhaps the most inopportune time, ran through his mind. He spotted 3 maple sprouts growing between the aged bricks of the building. No doubt someone walked in with a seed pod stuck to their pants leg. Then the seeds fell between the cracks between bricks. Notoriously hardy, maple seeds could sprout just about anywhere. Nurturing plants was one of his main duties as a healer. A foundation of folk magic involved encouraging plants to grow. That is exactly what he did to the maple sprout under Spelonian. Except this time, he imbued high magic into the folk magic spell. The result proved even more spectacular than Bok dared to hope. In less than a second, the 2-inch seedling expanded into a fully grown maple tree, 50 feet tall. The tree, and Spelonian, smashed through the foundry's tin roof, leaving a massive tree-filled hole in the ceiling. Bok hoped the sorcerer hadn't been killed, but he felt sure the fight had been taken out of the man. Not bad for a beginner. After days of feeling overwhelmed and confused by his new abilities, his chest swelled as he examined the fully formed tree growing through the factory floor. Meanwhile, Alaydrian kept Isabella on the defensive. The princess had a dozen or more counterattacks at the ready, but Alaydrian's all-out assault wouldn't allow her the opportunity to use any of them. Instead, Isabella focused on blocking the spells that came one after another. Sweat streamed down her face and matted her hair to her head. "Mind if I interrupt this dance?" Despite being in an intense battle with Narangian himself, Kotarian walked up behind Isabella and spoke to her over his shoulder. In between his jousting with his former classmate, he found time to throw a white globe of magical energy at the foundry's ceiling high above Alaydrian's head. The globe exploded into a flare of light, creating the effect of staring directly into a sun on the bright summer's day. "Aye!" The spell broke Alaydrian's concentration enough to give Isabella a brief respite. "Okay, Your Majesty. I want us to switch. You go on the offensive against Narangian. Leave Alaydrian to me." "No, Alaydrian said—" "Exactly. Alaydrian said." Kotarian turned his back to Narangian and forced Isabella to block the Scion's incoming attack, lest Kotarian be struck by Sonorian's sublime spear. She gasped at her colleague's fearlessness, or perhaps foolishness. "Tovano gave you plenty of magical knowledge, Your Majesty, but he failed to impart a predatory instinct. I was schooled in an eat-or-be-eaten environment, and I've dealt with bullies most of my life, to the point where I may have become one, I am sorry to say. I heard what Alaydrian said about your mother. As verbal warfare goes, it was hopelessly crude, but she knew it would make you careless. Let me deal with my former classmate. Believe me, there's nothing this dork can say that I haven't already heard 1,000 times before." He stepped forward to meet Alaydrian before Isabella could reply. Narangian smiled as she waved her hands above her head to cast another spell. The Scion stood between towering stacks of loaded crates.
"What an honor! I get to slay Imarinia's crown princess, the beloved and beautiful Isabella. But don't worry. Salandrian will allow you a royal funeral when I—"
"Be silent!" With a wave of Isabella's hand, the heavy crates beside Narangian toppled, crushing the Scion under hundreds of pounds of glass and wood. For once, Kotarian didn't want to fight. Keeping his shield spells up, he engaged his opponent with words, not sorcery. "Alaydrian, I plead with you. Do not do this. Not that I particularly like you, but we have been classmates since our time as apprentices. Doesn't that bond mean anything to you?" Alaydrian threw her head back and laughed.
"Ha! The House of Magic has rotted from the inside. The Scions of Sonorian don't wish to destroy the house. We want to return it to its rightful glory, and with it, Imarina, dragging it by the neck if need be."
A bolt of energy sizzled toward Kotarian, illuminating the massive wood and brick space. His shields brushed the attack aside, and it shattered a stack of crated jars into a cloud of wood and glass splinters. The scent of thunderstorms filled the space around him. "Yes, yes, the true path and all that retrograde nonsense. But you lived in Sonorian Square for years. You studied in our libraries, learned under our teachers, grumbled with your classmates in the commons, just as I did. Your actions betray the house and all of us who sacrificed beside you."
"Betray? You do not know of what you speak, Kotarian. The house turned its back on us long ago. You more than anyone. If only you knew."
"Enlighten me." He lobbed a blue-green globe of energy toward Alaydrian's shields. She blocked the spell with a nonchalant gesture, continuing their cat-and-mouse standoff. She prowled the wood-plank floors, eyes focused on her former classmate.
"Kotarian, my dear classmate, why were you chosen for this mission?"
"Why? Because I am the house's shining light." He tapped the pin on his chest vigorously. "I'm the top sorcerer in the Acolyte class. Why else would they have chosen me above all my classmates?"
"You really don't know, do you?"
She propped her hand under her chin to demonstrate her incredulity.
"Kotarian, you were picked because you were deemed expendable. The house leadership knew this mission could turn deadly. They were deeply worried by our actions at Osa Creek, despite what they told naive King Isbiano. If one of our ranks had to die, Kotarian, they wanted it to be you."
Kotarian's eyes narrowed. "Salandrian. He sent me to die because he sees me as a threat." Alaydrian laughed again.
"Salandrian wasn't even consulted about this decision. No, Leronian and Karagian decided that if any of our member had to die, it should be you."
"Impossible!" He dropped his shields. Didn't you hear what I said? I am the—" Alaydrian waved her hands around her face.
"The shining light. Top of the class. Yes, we've heard you crow for years. But dear Kotarian, we never liked you. No one would care if you died.
With that, Alaydrian projected a beam of solid magical energy at Kotarian. Balerian's barbarous bolt. The beam caught him squarely in the chest and knocked him backward into a pile of crates. Kotarian had been able to generate a last-moment shield spell. That alone prevented his sternum from being crushed. As it was, though, his torso screamed in excruciating pain. The force of impact knocked all the wind from his body. He laid on that hard floor and forced his brain to remain conscious. You caught me with that one, he coughed out. Rather than reply, she unleashed a second beam of energy. Kotarian didn't have the chance to use a shield spell, but dodged the fatal blow using a wind whisper spell. Or Juvanian's judicious jump, as it was known by the house. He crawled on his hands and knees behind another stack of crates. An undignified tactic for the house's shining light, but necessary. Kotarian needed to recover his wits before re-engaging with his former classmate.
Reduced to hiding behind boxes? For shame, Kotarian.
He heard a high-pitched whine, and a half-second later, a stack of crates 10 feet to his right exploded into a mist of wood and glass splinters. If he had still been behind those crates when the spell struck. Kotarian inhaled deeply and soaked his lungs with stale air. He then jumped to his feet, firing Malarian's momentous meteor at Alaydrian. A pebble-sized rock, engulfed in a tiny flame, appeared from the tip of his index finger. It grew exponentially as it surged toward the surprised Alaydrian, eventually reaching a full diameter of 3 feet. Unfortunately for Kotarian, she split the burning hunk of rock into fragments with a counterspell. He was not so fortunate on her next attack. His attempt counter missed, and her blast destroyed the crates directly in front of Kotarian. His shields held, mostly. It protected him from the brunt of the explosion, but glass shrapnel sliced through his right cheek, shoulder, and thigh, staining his gray tunic and pants with blood. He touched his bleeding face, which burned and throbbed. He tapped his star pin and muttered, "Think, stupid man. Why did you spend all those late nights studying if not for this moment? The answer is there. You must be smart enough to find it." And then he did. Kotarian stood up from behind the last stack of crates still standing, his hands in the air. "Hold, Alaydrian. You are improved, to be sure. Certainly better than I give you credit for. But before I remove this pin and place it on your black jacket, I have one final question. Think back to Session 4, Weeks 3 and 4. What did we learn about then?" She cocked her head to the side.
What in the stars are you playing at, Kotarian? Do you think this some academic exercise? This is life or death, and we know which card you have pulled.
He shrugged. Well, it doesn't really matter. Kotarian quickly dropped his hands and expended the last bit of energy he could muster to generate a giant iron javelin from the ether and shoot it at Alaydrian. She gasped, but then knocked the deadly missile above her head and behind her with a last-second shield spell.
That was your last chance, Kotarian. It was a good one. Palaxian's preeminent projectile. It failed, and now you.
Alaydrian only had a second to look down at the giant iron javelin protruding point first through her chest, having circled back and struck her from behind. She fell face forward and landed on the foundry floor with a pronounced thump. Not Palaxian's preeminent projectile. Kotarian wiped blood from his cheek. Dolarian's devilish deceit. Session 4, Weeks 2, 3, and 4. We learned misdirection spells. I suppose one of us paid attention.